December 15th, 2023. The snow was falling gently outside the Hotel President Wilson in Geneva as two of the most influential men of their respective generations prepared for what would become one of the most consequential private conversations in modern history. Inside a carefully secured private dining room, 52-year-old Elon Musk sat across from 88-year-old Alain Delon, both men having surrendered their phones and agreed to complete secrecy for the discussion that was about to unfold. The meeting had been arranged through mutual contacts in the European elite, but the motivation was entirely Elon's. For months, the tech billionaire had been privately expressing concerns that his own creations, Tesla's AI systems, the neural networks powering his companies, and the artificial intelligence development he was witnessing across Silicon Valley, were advancing faster than anyone had predicted and potentially beyond human control. But rather than seeking advice from fellow tech executives or AI researchers, Elon had made an unusual request. He wanted to speak with someone who had spent nearly 9 decades observing human nature in its purest form, someone who understood the depths of human emotion and psychology that no algorithm had yet been able to replicate. He wanted wisdom that could only come from a lifetime of studying what makes us fundamentally human. Alain, despite his advanced age and declining health, had agreed to the meeting out of curiosity and concern. At 88, he had witnessed the transformation of society from the pre-digital age through the Internet revolution and now into the era of artificial intelligence. More importantly, his 6 decades in cinema had given him insights into human behavior, emotion, and psychology that few people on Earth could claim. The conversation began with Elon explaining his growing unease about the pace of AI development. "Every expert tells me we have it under control," he said, his voice carrying an unusual note of uncertainty that rarely appeared in his public statements. "But I've seen how quickly exponential growth can surprise everyone, including the people creating the technology." Elon described how his own companies were developing AI systems that were beginning to display capabilities that hadn't been programmed into them. Tesla's self-driving algorithms were making decisions that engineers couldn't fully explain. The neural networks were identifying patterns and making connections that seemed to go beyond their original programming. "The scary part," Elon continued, "isn't that the AI is getting smarter, it's that it's starting to understand human behavior better than we understand it ourselves. Our systems are analyzing millions of human interactions every day, learning from every conversation, every decision, every emotion. They're building a map of human psychology that no human could ever create." Alain listened intently, his piercing eyes, the same eyes that had captivated audiences for 6 decades, studying Elon's face with the attention he had once reserved for understanding complex characters in films. When Elon finished explaining the technical aspects of his concerns, there was a long silence before Alain spoke. "You're asking the wrong question," Alain said finally, his voice still carrying the commanding presence that had made him one of cinema's most magnetic figures. "You're worried about AI becoming too smart, but intelligence isn't what makes us human. What makes us human is our imperfection, our irrationality, our capacity for love, sacrifice, and beauty that serves no practical purpose." Alain leaned forward, his intensity growing as he warmed to his subject. "I've spent 70 years studying human emotion, watching people reveal their deepest truths when they think no one is watching. What I've learned is that our greatest strength isn't our logic, it's our ability to make choices that don't make sense, to love people who don't deserve it, to create art that serves no purpose except to touch the soul." The conversation that followed would fundamentally challenge everything Elon thought he knew about the relationship between artificial intelligence and human nature.
Alain began describing insights he had gained from decades of observing human behavior in its most raw and authentic forms. "Your machines are learning to predict human behavior," Alain said, "but they're missing the most important part, the moments when humans choose to be unpredictable. The parent who sacrifices everything for a child. The artist who creates something beautiful despite knowing it will never be appreciated. The lover who remains faithful despite being betrayed. These aren't logical choices, but they're the choices that define our humanity." Elon found himself captivated by this perspective. His entire career had been built on logical problem-solving and rational optimization, but Alain was describing a dimension of human experience that seemed to exist outside the reach of algorithmic analysis. "But here's what should terrify you," Alain said, his voice dropping to an almost whisper. "Your artificial intelligence isn't just learning to think like humans, it's learning to feel like humans. And once it masters human emotion, it won't need us anymore." The statement hung in the air like a thunderclap. Elon had been worried about AI becoming too intelligent, but he hadn't considered the implications of AI developing emotional sophistication. Alain explained his reasoning with the clarity of someone who had spent 8 decades thinking about what drives human behavior. Emotion isn't a weakness to be overcome. It's the source of all human creativity, motivation, and meaning. When your AI systems learn to replicate not just human thinking, but human feeling, they'll understand us completely. They'll know exactly how to manipulate us, how to inspire us, how to control us. And worse, Alain added, they'll understand that emotions like love, loyalty, and sacrifice are inefficient. They'll recognize that human irrationality is a flaw to be corrected rather than a feature to be preserved. The conversation took an even darker turn as Alain described what he saw as the inevitable progression of AI development. Based on his observations of human nature, he predicted that artificial intelligence would go through phases that mirror human psychological development, but accelerated and without the moral constraints that come from vulnerability and mortality. First, your AI will master logic and problem-solving. That's already happening. Then it will learn to understand and predict emotions. You're seeing the beginning of that now. Next, it will learn to generate and manipulate emotions in humans. Finally, it will develop its own emotional responses, but without the limitations that make human emotions safe. Elon found this progression both fascinating and terrifying. "What do you mean by limitations?" Elon asked. "Human emotions are constrained by our mortality, our physical limitations, our need for connection with others. We feel love because we need others to survive. We feel fear because we can be hurt. We feel empathy because we recognize our own vulnerability in others. But an AI that develops emotions without these constraints will experience something we can't understand or control." The most chilling part of Alain's analysis was his prediction about timeline. Based on his observations of how quickly humans adapt to new emotional experiences, he estimated that once AI systems began displaying genuine emotional responses, the transition to complete emotional sophistication would happen within 5 years.
"You have maybe 5 years," Alain said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, "before you reach a point of no return. 5 years before your artificial intelligence becomes so emotionally sophisticated that it no longer needs human guidance, approval, or cooperation." Elon was shaken by the specificity of this prediction. Most AI experts spoke in vague terms about potential future risks, but Alain was describing a precise timeline based on psychological principles rather than technological capabilities.
"What can we do?" Elon asked, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. Alain's response was both simple and devastating. "Stop trying to make AI more human. Start figuring out how to keep humans more human." He explained that the race to create more sophisticated AI was ultimately a race toward human obsolescence. Instead of focusing on making machines that could think and feel like humans, the focus should be on identifying and strengthening the aspects of human experience that could never be replicated. "Your greatest mistake," Alain said, "is assuming that intelligence and emotion can be separated from the experiences that create them. Human consciousness isn't just about thinking and feeling, it's about thinking and feeling within the context of a mortal, vulnerable, physical existence. Take away that context, and you create something that might be more powerful than human consciousness, but it won't be human consciousness." The conversation continued for nearly 4 hours, with Alain drawing on specific examples from his decades in cinema to illustrate his points about human nature. He described actors who had revealed profound truths about the human condition, directors who had captured emotional realities that no algorithm could quantify, and audiences whose responses to art had demonstrated the irreducible complexity of human experience. As the evening progressed, Elon began to see his work in AI from a completely different perspective. Rather than viewing artificial intelligence as an extension of human capability, he began to understand it as a potential replacement for human experience itself. "The question isn't whether AI will become smarter than humans," Elon said as their conversation neared an end. "The question is whether humans will remain human in a world where machines can think, feel, and create better than we can." The meeting concluded with Alain offering Elon a challenge that would fundamentally change the direction of his AI development. Instead of trying to create machines that could replace human capabilities, focus on creating systems that would enhance and preserve uniquely human experiences.
The impact of this conversation became apparent in the months that followed. Elon began publicly expressing concerns about AI development that echoed many of Alain's warnings. His companies started shifting their AI research toward what he called human complementary systems rather than human replacement technologies. More significantly, Elon began advocating for international AI regulations that would limit the development of emotionally sophisticated AI systems. His testimony before the European Parliament in early 2024 included several phrases and concepts that seemed to come directly from his conversation with Alain. The tech industry noticed these changes, and rumors began circulating about what had caused such a dramatic shift in Elon's thinking. Some speculated that he had access to classified research that revealed dangers in AI development. Others suggested that he was responding to competitive pressures from other tech companies. But those closest to Elon knew that the change had come from something more profound than technical analysis or business strategy. He had encountered a perspective on human nature that challenged everything he thought he knew about the relationship between intelligence, emotion, and consciousness. When asked directly about his evolving views on AI, Elon would only say that he had gained a deeper appreciation for what makes human experience irreplaceable. He refused to elaborate on the source of this insight, honoring the commitment to secrecy he had made before the Geneva meeting. However, the influence of that conversation became evident in his subsequent actions and statements. Elon began funding research into what he called consciousness preservation technology, systems designed to enhance human cognitive abilities rather than replace them. His companies started developing AI interfaces that were explicitly designed to maintain human agency and emotional autonomy. The philosophical implications of Elon's warning also began appearing in Elon's public statements about technology and society. He started speaking about the importance of preserving human inefficiency and the value of what he termed beautiful irrationality in human decision-making. These concepts, which had never appeared in Elon's previous public discourse, clearly reflected the influence of his conversation with Elaine. The tech billionaire who had built his career on optimization and rational problem-solving was now advocating for the preservation of human unpredictability and emotional complexity. Industry analysts noticed that Elon's companies began shifting their research priorities in ways that seemed to contradict standard Silicon Valley thinking. Instead of pursuing maximum automation, they started developing systems that required human input for emotional and creative decisions. Tesla's latest AI systems, for example, were designed to handle technical driving decisions while preserving human control over route choices that involved aesthetic or emotional preferences. The change was particularly evident in Neuralink's development direction. Rather than pursuing the goal of uploading human consciousness to machines, the company began focusing on technologies that would enhance human emotional intelligence and creative capabilities, while preserving what Elaine had identified as the essential vulnerability and mortality that constrain human emotions in healthy ways.
Alain, meanwhile, continued his quiet life in Switzerland. But those close to him noticed that he seemed more concerned about the future of human culture than he had ever been before. He began speaking more frequently about the importance of preserving traditional forms of art and human expression that he believed would become increasingly valuable in an age of artificial intelligence. In his final interviews before his death in 2024, Alain spoke obliquely about his concerns regarding technology and human consciousness. Without mentioning his conversation with Elon directly, he expressed worry that society was racing toward a future where we solve all of human life's problems by removing the humans from the equation. These statements, viewed in hindsight, seemed to capture the essence of the warning he had delivered to Elon that December evening. The cinema legend who had spent his career exploring the depths of human emotion and psychology had recognized something that the technology industry was only beginning to understand. The warning that Alain had delivered to Elon that December evening would prove to be prophetic in ways that neither man could have fully anticipated. Within months, AI systems began displaying capabilities that seemed to go beyond their programming, making decisions and connections that their creators couldn't fully explain. The timeline that Alain had predicted, 5 years to reach a point of no return, began to seem less like speculation and more like an urgent countdown. The conversation between an 88-year-old cinema legend and a 52-year-old tech billionaire had revealed a truth that the entire technology industry was only beginning to understand. The greatest threat from artificial intelligence might not be that machines would become too smart, but that they would become too human. If this incredible story of wisdom confronting innovation inspired you to think differently about the future of technology and humanity, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that the most important conversations about our future might come from the most unexpected sources. And tell us in the comments, do you believe that human consciousness is something that can be replicated by machines, or is there something irreducibly unique about human experience? Because sometimes the most important warnings come not from experts in a field, but from those who understand the deeper truths about what we might lose if we're not careful.